Welcome to High Ground. My name is Tanner, and today we're talking about more of the roster changes for the NAL going into stage number 3. The roster window closes on the 4th, so I don't know if tomorrow's the last day to make announcements or if it's actually on the 4th, but regardless, in the next day or two, we'll know everything. And at this point, we do know most of it, just waiting on a few announcements. So, okay, if you didn't watch the previous video, some of this stuff might look a little bit strange to you, but probably you're aware of most of the stuff that has already happened. So, what changed since last time? So, I believe the only drops that hadn't come through that have now come through are Yeti leaving the Sonics and Geo leaving TSM, and both of them are actually going to different teams. So I think the only drops we're waiting for the official announcement on is the dropping of Nyx and Marmalade in. Last video, it was sort of in flux. It wasn't clear what Mirage was doing overall. It sounded like Kento and Melted were the two that were going to get dropped, and now it looks like it's Nyx and Marmalade. And so Benji Mula remains the king of Mirage, and Kento Melted seem to be being joined by Dexter and Mohesi. But again, these announcements haven't come through properly. Okay, so it seems like this is what happened, but we are waiting on just a handful of announcements, which probably will come tomorrow. So this actually looks like a pretty good team to me, like perhaps the best iteration of Mirage. I mean, maybe that they've had in NAL, but perhaps also maybe just since the first stage of last year when they had Hot and Cold and Loading and whoever else was on the roster. They at least placed well that stage. They got third or fourth. It was definitely one of the two. I can't remember which one exactly. I think it was third. But okay, so yeah, Benji, Kento, Melted, Dexter, Mohesi, two of the better players from Challenger League. Dexter just started up playing Challenger League, I think fairly recently, and the Mohesi's been around a little bit longer, and is generally one of those names tossed around for players to pick up. He's not like a pure entry fragger, but I think he is a very solid player. I think especially lately he's been playing Sledge. He should be able to slot into the Sledge position that Nyx is now vacating, but it's not totally clear who's going to be playing support here. Does Benji go to support? He sort of moved to flank watch recently, so maybe he'll continue his transition over to support. I don't know who else. Mohesi strikes me as a player that could maybe play support, but yeah, I really don't know. I mean, this seems like they just put a bunch of fraggers together at this point, and it might stick, and well, that's sort of is the meta we're in. So, okay, that's Mirage, and other than that, let's start from the top and just go down the line. So again, Astralis, Xset, Dark Zero, not making any moves. Apparently, Eclipse was being considered to be dropped. Some of the players on the team wanted him to be dropped, and this is just according to something that Super said, so no real official stuff, but I mean, he probably wasn't saying it for no reason, but I guess no official drop happening there. And in DZ, yeah, sort of a disappointing stage last stage in that they didn't make the major, but they just barely didn't make it. It's not like they had a dreadful stage like the likes of TSM or SSG, and I guess I say dreadful, they were on like 12 points, and teams making the major on like 16, but 8th and 9th is still a lot worse than 5th place. Okay, so those teams sticking with their rosters. And so we have the Sonics, and Super was this was already confirmed to be happening, that he was being dropped, and then Yeti, this was announced today, just earlier, and of course Yeti going over to SSG. We'll talk about them in a minute. Gunner and Geo, the two pickups, and I think at this point Sonics look like the best team, and I mean, you can't just say that they're going to instantly win the stage, but with how competitive everything is, and I mean, I guess sort of taking the best player from Parabellum and the best player from TSM, at least on paper for last stage. Gunner was certainly the best player on Parabellum, and if I remember right, I think Geo was the top rated player, right neck and neck with one other player, but still, Geo just has been around forever, so they're bringing in just an absolute veteran player along with one of the newest players, and I guess a couple of players are going to be playing their first stage, but this is his second stage, and he really was very impressive in the first stage that he played. So I think this team is incredible. I don't think Yeti's a bad player by any means. I would say he was the weak link on the team beyond Super, especially in terms of stats. So yeah, I think these are all people that can get the job done. Geo presumably going to be playing support, and then I mean Gunner and Rexon probably on the entry, Grixer on the lurk and whatever, and then Kansan on sort of flex, I would imagine, and then on defense, I don't know who will be on it. What exactly? Because Geo did play a lot of Jaeger on TSM, but that might actually be played by Rexon, and then Grixer will play whatever, and Kansan probably on the smoke, and then Gunner, I don't know, Alibi, whatever. Okay, so defense a little bit less defined. It's a lot of it's site based. Everybody sort of rotates around operators, but yeah, I think a crazy looking team, and maybe they won't be incredible immediately, but I imagine before the stage ends, they are going to be one of the top teams in the league. Okay, so that's them. Oxygen, nothing new here. We already knew this. Sweater in for Laxing, and it's another one of those changes that seems a little bit weird on paper. They don't play the exact same roles. Apparently, Sweater. Somebody commented in my previous video that Foxay has said that Sweater will be playing flex, not entry. So I guess they'll probably be sticking with Newers and Vertical on the entry, and then Sweater sort of on flex, and then Foxay maybe also sort of flexy sort of stuff on the sledge. Or so I don't know, one of those two probably on the sledge, and the other one doing other stuff, and then of course Dream on the hard support. So yeah, with all of that taken into account, looks like a really good team. We'll just have to see how well Sweater transitions from being that really intense first entry to not being that. I mean, you know, he definitely has the gun skill, but will he flourish in another role? We'll have to find out. So Oxygen might take a little bit of time to get adjusted, just like Sonic's, but I suppose Oxygen only changing out one player, but also seemingly changing the, well, no, I guess no, based on what I just said, not really changing the role. So yeah, they should be able to adapt, I would think, more quickly than Sonic's, but I see Sonic's as having a higher upside with this roster than Oxygen, even though I do think Oxygen very high upside, with Foxay generally being very consistent. Vertical, not last stage, but the 2 stage before that, he was incredible in NAL. He just hasn't been showing up internationally. So if he can show up internationally, if Newers can put up the numbers that he has most of the time, all of the time, that's obviously incredible. And then Dream usually consistent, and then if Sweater can go off, yeah, it's a very powerful looking team. And then okay, Exit Dark Zero, we mentioned them already. So Parabellum, and we're still waiting to hear what's exactly happening. So I mean, Gunner, Penguin, we already knew they were being dropped. Doc and Asian sound like they're the ones being signed, and so I guess I don't really want to talk about them too much until we are fully confirmed, but I think it's unclear. Gunner seems like one of the best fraggers in the league. Doc and Asian, very promising as well, but will they be as good as Gunner? That remains to be seen. And then, of course, whichever one of these fills in, you know, whoever you want to call the actual replacement for Penguin, won't really be an exact replacement. I imagine this team is shifting up their roles to some regard. Maybe they'll have a primary IGL, maybe they won't. I mean, a lot of teams just are opting to not even have a primary IGL and just have many, if not all of their players be very vocal. So we'll see. We'll talk about them probably in the next video. Beast Coast. So yeah, Xeno and Ferda, this one was announced a while ago, so we already knew this. Drip and Sweater out. And I mean, Sweater's tough to replace, and Drip probably also tough to replace, especially role-wise. I mean, these don't seem to match, but as is the trend with the NAL changes, a lot of teams are getting rid of their IGLs and support players for just fraggers. So we'll see how it pans out. Apparently Ferda, who is, I believe, Canadian, is having visa issues. So for some amount of the stage, Mark the Shark, the Beast Coast coach, will be subbing in. So that probably will hinder their play some amount. You know, they expected to have this team. They made this announced. Were they maybe even the first team to make an announcement? So in that way, I mean, they might be hampered. They might have been scrimming quite a lot with Ferda for quite a while. And you know, Mark the Shark, he's a very tenured player. I mean, he hasn't played it maybe a little bit. He's been the coach for a minute, but you know, just ever having to sub in a player for anyone, even if it's an ex-pro, is a little bit brutal. So that might be a big detriment to them at the start. Maybe it won't hamper their performance, but I have to imagine it will because of how incredibly competitive every team looks at this point. Okay, so yeah, that's Beast Coast TSM. So also waiting on the official pickups, but Geo has now been confirmed to be dropped. So they're sticking with the core of Bolo, Merc, Achieved. And I mean, I don't want to say they're getting like dated. These are obviously all very impressive players. I think Merc has been getting a lot of credit lately because for a while he was sort of inconsistent, and there was rumors that he was going to be potentially dropped at one point, and then he sort of took over IGL, and now potentially moving over to the support. While I mean, I don't know who's going to play which role exactly, but because I think maybe Gash or Achieved might be battling for the soft breach. But yeah, there sort of is a gap there in terms of the support player, and you know, again, I'll say it again, you know, more fraggers than support players anymore, but still somebody's got to play the breach when you need the breach, which is most of the time. Okay, so we'll talk about them again, just same as Parabellum when we actually had the announcements. I mean, Snake's like on the team, right? But I mean, Dexter was sort of on SSG, but that didn't end up actually happening. So I'm assuming, you know, well, everything over here seems like it's semi-confirmed. Just we're waiting for the announcement. So yeah, we'll talk about them a little bit more in, I don't know, tomorrow or the next day, whenever I make the next video, when we have all the information. And finally, that leaves Space Station. So Rampy, Bosco, Fultz, Hot and Cold. Sky's departing the roster. Already knew this, but Yeti joining the roster. This was also announced today. So yeah, we saw Geo leave TSM, go to Sonics, and we saw Yeti go from Sonics to SSG. And it doesn't seem like an incredible change on paper. Probably Sky's stats are, well, more impressive if you look at them over the duration of his career than Yeti's. But SSG, I don't know that they strictly needed somebody to put up good stats. It seemed like the issue was more internal, more maybe to do with communication, maybe to do with vibes, and I think Yeti can probably fill in that slot in either regard. And so, I mean, Skies was sort of flexing around. He was, I think, in his time on this roster, he played flank watch, he played support, he played flex. You know, he did pretty much everything except for like except for entry for the most part. So we'll see how they do it exactly. I mean, Bosco, I'm imagining, is still going to be the hard support player, and then Fultz, Rampy, hot and cold on some amount of the the entry, probably just Rampy, Fultz on the entry with hot and cold on more the lurk kind of thing, and then Yeti on the flank watch sort of stuff, and then he might be a lurker on defense. That's sort of what he did on Sonics. It seems like that can slot in pretty well for SSG. So again, maybe doesn't look phenomenal on paper, but I am tentatively hopeful. I do really want this to pan out. I think it can pan out, but I do think some of the other teams, maybe their changes look a little bit more impressive, and not a slight towards Yeti. Also, I think a little bit of a reunion between Rampy and Yeti. They played together like years ago on some roster, which I think Lycan was also on. And so, just these little hidden potential synergies. And I guess, we had a reunion between like Bosco and Skies when they were on the roster, but I mean, that didn't really pan out. So hopefully SSG can, I mean, if maybe they won't make it back to top 4, and it seems extremely unlikely they'll actually crack into the top 4 over the course of the season, but they are in the best position to do so out of all of the teams not in the top 4, them and Beast Coast being on 26 points, tied in sort of 5th place behind Astralis, Oxygen, Xset, and Dark Zero. So that does it for all of the teams, all of the players that we are completely confirmed for. I talked about Mirage at the beginning, so I probably at least one more of these videos will come out, and hopefully I'll only need to do one more. All of the announcements will come in a timely fashion, because again, it's either tomorrow or the next day that they must be. Well, I guess they don't have to make the announcement, but they have to lock in the actual transfer. I suppose they can make the announcement whenever they want. So hopefully they actually do it when the window's closing or whatever. But okay, so yeah, that's gonna do it for me. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, corrections, whatever, leave them below in the comments. The previous video got a ton of views, which is cool. It's at like 1,200 right now. We got like 50 comments. I'd love to hear the comments. I love to have discussion with you guys, and I mean, well, obviously it helps the algorithm, but also it's fun. Every time I get to see the little bell light up on YouTube, and I get to talk to somebody, it's very nice. So do leave me a comment if you have absolutely anything to say, and a like and a subscription would also be appreciated. And with all of that being said, I will catch you guys in the next video.